Hello all. My last two podcasts have been on defining what is wild, what we tend to call wild, as opposed to the weedy or naturally growing. Definitions are always somewhat contentious. So I would like you to listen to the podcast with an open mind and not readily agree to what I propose, but use the ideas in the podcast to trigger your own thoughts on the topic and come up with what is the most logical for you. Maybe the same as what I have proposed, you will conclude. I would love to hear your definition. Maybe it's something different. Bring it on. Now you're tuning in to the 53rd episode of the Audible Weed Walk. This is Nina welcoming you. How have you been? Summer sprays, cloudy skies. We are slowly inching towards the full-fledged northeastern monsoon in Tamil Nadu soon. After months of lockdown, recently I had gone to the highway, and right around there is a roadside cafe we call dhaba. I have been missing the normalcy of this little glass tumblers delivering piping hot tea. There are several types of teas served there, cutting chai, the usual latte chai. In rainy days, that gets a squeeze of ginger. There's a green tea for the discerning, and lemon tea with the lemon and mint. And my favorite is a version of the lemon tea that comes with a very light tea, a bit of jaggery if you want or not, ginger, a hint of mint, and kept in mind with a few sabja seeds floating around as it gets served. A perfect beverage for the rain-washed evening, looking at the amazing play of light and cloud patterns. My attention went back to my tea and was pondering about sabja. The seeds we use, but do we use the leaves much? Well, it is, the classic story of the wild cousin who goes abroad and got recognition. Somewhat of a Pygmalion story, the My Fair Lady types, where the simple peasant woman was transformed by Professor Higgins and refined into somebody completely different. So that completely different process is the cultivar, and the wild, which what the material was. So digging around, I found, what is the story behind this sabja and its leaves? So here is a list of some usage of the plant and the seed that I have found, and it includes by our local authors, several articles, and by an Italian naturalist called Umberto Cutraci. He mentions that it has been used in Ayurveda, Unani, in Siddha for a long time. Back in my desk, I started to do some research and reading. So the seeds, as you know, become slimy when it's soaked in water. Mucilaginous seeds infusion, it should be, not more than about a tablespoon per day soaked you can have. My advice, never take anything that every day, give a gap and diversify your routine intake also. But why would you want to take it every day anyway? Turns out that apart from being rich in vitamin K, beta-carotene and iron, it is also good for weight loss, balancing sugar, relieving constipation and bloating, treats acidity, heartburn, good for coughs and cold, and hence the practice in some places to add it to tea, like this one during and after the rains. It's also good for skin and hair, by the way. It is an antioxidant and has antifungal properties also. For me, the first time I saw sabja seeds, it looked too curiously like tiny little tadpoles encased in eggs, and was, in an old ubiquitous joint called Shangri-La. I forget whether it was a restaurant or a cafe. Doesn't matter. It doesn't exist anymore. I think that was the only time I had gone to that restaurant to have the famous faluda. Do you know what a faluda is? Well, originally, it's a It's a Persian dish came from the word felude. A version of this dish is found across South and West Asia. The South Asian version is called faluda. It's a cold noodle vermicelli dessert with rose petals, rose syrup, milk, saffron, giving it pink and yellow color, and it's served with either kulfi or ice cream. I got it with the kulfi. That's the original version, apparently. What is not to like about it? The other most prominent ingredient in this whole dessert, combination is sabja, adding it to the crunch and a character to this dish. I did not know what it was good for, but it tastes mighty good. Quattracci's book also lists some unique uses of the leaves of this plant. Do you know what the plant is? Well, let's read on. Let's hear. The leaves pounded and soaked in water, it can be applied for headache. And the decoction is good for a postpartum remedy. Though I have read somewhere else that the seeds and the leaves are not to be taken by pregnant women because it lowers estrogen and it's not good during the pregnancy. Flowers and the leaves for coughs and colds are sore throat and fever, and the whole plant is used both in Asia and in parts of Africa and in Europe for ceremonies and treated sort of like a holy plant. The leaves of this plant with amla or Phyllanthus emblica given with honey can cure loss of appetite even in animals. So what is this plant? Those who know about sabja already must be thinking, yes, that's the basil. But which basil? Tulsi basil? Which tulsi? Ram tulsi, Krishna tulsi, Karpura tulsi, or bon-tulsi? As you know, the word van refers to forest or being wild. Well, here comes the story of the cousins. There are about 63 wild tulsi species. The one that grows commonly in India, wild on their own, and some are grown, are Ocimum tenuiflorum, which used to be called Ocimum sanctum. This is our holy tulsi, the usual that we know. Then there is Ocimum graticeium or Ram tulsi. Then there is Ocimum canum or Ocimum americanum. It's called Kali tulsi or Dulal tulsi. Then there is Ocimum kilimanjaricum, which is Karpura tulsi. And our Ocimum basilicum, the kind of the black sheep of the family and the wild one, because it is called bon-tulsi or the wild one. So do you know what the Ocimum basilicum why it has an Italian sounding name? You got it right. This is the sweet basil. A cultivated variety of it, Ocimum basilicum tyriflora, is the thyrsiflora. Thyr, thyrisfola or thyrsiflola, however you pronounce it, is the Thai basil. So it turns out of all these basil plants, genetically, this wild basil is closest to our, the holy basil that we have, that we use. Holy basil, we have many uses. I'm sure that many of you know many more uses of holy basil than I do. Heavily used in all naturopathy, Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, and others. Sabja is the seed of the sweet basil, or this bon-tulsi or the wild one. And all the medicinal uses of the plant that I have just listed is from Ayurveda, Siddha and Unani tradition are for the sweet basils, which are different from tulsi, but it's limited than tulsi. Tulsi has a lot more wider variety of characters that we use. So in Sanskrit, this bon-tulsi is called Gandha Panirajaka. So in Hindi and Tamil, both it is called sabja, and in Tamil it is also called pachai. I think in Bengali and Hindi and several other languages, it's called bon-tulsi or bon-tulsi. So, in case, so this is a slightly, the wilder variety. Evidently, the tulsi or different types of it have been used, especially holy tulsi and others, were used some 3000, 4000 BCE in India. Again, just like the other spices, it probably traveled a lot before that to Egypt, to other countries, but it started traveling much more frequently to Europe in the land routes before 15th century, but after the Portuguese had arrived in India, it got a greater traffic and trade. The trade was dominated by the Portuguese before, and then the Arabs, and then the British took over the trade. By the way, the British did not think much of the tulsi at all. In fact, in 1980s, which is like pretty recent, British Ministry of Agriculture bulletin on herbs stated basil to be a little of no importance. So clearly it is not their patronage that made sweet basil such a celebrity. Sweet basil too likely first went to Europe as a medicinal plant, just like pepper did. Remember in my podcast on peppers, I had mentioned how the different pepper plants were used in Greece for medicinal purpose only. And later, it was in Italy that people had started eating it like in food, just like it was also used in India. However, sweet basil was not eaten much as food in India. How is that? It is perhaps tulsi and all its cousins are revered plant in India, have a holy status. They are not eaten much in India. And for the reason, for what reason, I do not know. But likely that is to be one of the reasons why we do not use sweet basil in our food that much. But then the seeds and the leaves have medicinal uses. But then when the plant went abroad, it was, has a great application in cuisine. In Italy, it got popular as food. Italians grew the plant with preferred traits, and three most popular today is Genovese, which is, what we see, a large, sweet, wonderfully fragrant basil leaves, followed by one which has the, smell of anise, and then another has a smell of cinnamon in the basil leaves itself. Of course, there are many more varieties. It is hard to imagine Italian cuisine today without pesto or use of fresh basils. And they are the leaves of our own sabja, the wild cousin or the bon-tulsi that traveled abroad and became a celebrity. So all of you know how to incorporate sabja in your meal anyway as an alternative to chia seeds. People usually just soak it and put it in their, breakfast meal and try that way. But that gets a bit boring. Why not try faluda? Cook up a cup of save or rice vermicelli of any kind. You can add a little bit of saffron while you are doing that. Actually, the ideal would be to cook the vermicelli, then take half of it out and put it in a saffron-soaked water. So half would be a little yellowish and the rest would be white. Soak in 1 tablespoon of sabja seeds in water. Get coconut milk or regular milk. Lightly sweeten it or not is according to your taste. It tastes absolutely wonderful with fresh squeezed coconut milk. Once the vermicelli is cooked, drained and in room temperature, assemble in a large tall glass. Put a teaspoon of honey, and this is optional, at the base. And then you add the vermicelli of different colors. If you have put it in different colors, then, mix up the colors. And then you add a bit of the plump sabja seeds, half of the plump sabja seeds at this point, because by then you had soaked the sabja, so they have already, become little, like mucilaginous, little, tadpole-ish looking thing. I call it tadpole looking. And then 1 teaspoon or little more of rose syrup. In India, we use roux afza, and that has been the standard. And then gently pour in the milk if you are using milk, or coconut milk if you are using that. Then you put the remaining sabja and garnish with a tulsi leaf, not sweet basil, fresh tulsi. Enjoy, and remember the travel, the less revered cousin at home who traveled to the world and became famous. This is all for now. Hope you've enjoyed the tale. More next week, and stay well and stay safe.